And as everyone filters in, please take a moment to introduce yourself and who you are and where you're from, maybe the organization that you're with in the chat box, please. We'd love to get a sense of who's in the audience today. And actually, we'll scrap that introduction in the chat box because our chat box is disabled for this webinar, and you're unable to change that while you're in the webinar. Okay, but the Q&A box does work, so that's a good thing. We'll get started here. Good morning, I'm David Zarling, Program Manager for the Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network. And for those of you who don't know who we are, we're a cooperative extension community of practice that exists to provide technical assistance and educational resources to small and mid-sized livestock producers, meat processors, and the associated segments of their supply chain partners. Love to welcome you to today's webinar. We're going to feature 5 different speakers who all represent the national effort to connect stakeholders and resources along the meat supply chain throughout the country by way of organizing regional meat summits. We're joined today by Becca Jablonski of Colorado State University, Martha Sullins of Colorado State University. We've got Sarah Blacklin of NC Choices, Pete Huff, the Wallace Center, and we may be joined by Tommy Bass of Montana State. We might see him today. Now, if you haven't been to a meat summit before, I can share firsthand that they are truly events that are worth your time and your attention to attend. I tend to travel a bit for NPAN and attend a fair amount of annual conventions, conferences, and other live educational events. And I can confidently say that the meat summit that I attended this year, the Mountain Meat Summit at Colorado State, was truly one of the most inspiring and well-organized events I've been to in the last 5 years. It was awesome. I mean, there was just so much networking, so many brilliant folks there. Lots of innovative processors and different organizations were represented there, and it was just such a great meeting place of minds. And I left feeling really refreshed and inspired about the work that we're all doing in the industry. So this group of panelists and myself would love to share some of these programs with you because we all think there's a ton of opportunities that we can only advance by working together and making everyone aware of new products, markets, and other business approaches. And that all happens at the Meat Summit. And what we're truly hoping we can interest you in attending one of these, maybe supporting one or even hosting one in your region if you don't have one today. So on behalf of the entire panelist group, thank you for attending. And before we get started, I'd just like to give a brief overview of how our webinars work. So our group of panelists are going to walk us through their presentations, and then we're going to open up the floor for a Q&A session, which I'll moderate. So unfortunately, the chat box isn't working today, but that'll kind of help us focus our questions and comments into the Q&A box. And we'll address those at the end of the presentation after we stop sharing our screen. All of our videos will come up, and I'll be able to read those questions and pose them to our group of panelists, and then they'll be able to kind of share the opportunity to answer those. And before we get started, I'd like to just share a quick poll of it's
He'll come back, folks.
What's that?
We're used to this in this day and age.
Good. Yeah, so we're gonna do a quick poll and get a sense of who's joining us today. It's just 3 short questions, so please fill them out and and we'll share the results with the group so you know who's here as well. So let's see what we've got here.
David,
Mm-hmm.
you did freeze, so you, at least on my end, you might have to repeat just introducing the poll.
Okay, so we've Yeah, great. Thank you very much. We've got a poll that we're going to launch here, and it'll give us kind of a sense of who's joining us today. And then it's just three short questions, and we'll be able to share those results with the group. The first question is, which region do you work? The second one is, which part of the meat supply chain do you work in? And then the third one is, have you attended a meat summit before? If not, are you planning to? Just take another 20 seconds or so. Okay, we've got almost everybody, so we'll end the poll now. Got a nice even distribution of folks. Lots of Midwesterners with us today. Welcome everybody. Good to see my neighbors in the Northwest here. And we've got a nice mix of who's represented between farmers, ranchers, processors, buyers, service providers, educators. Great, great. Welcome everybody. And looks like we got about a 50-50 split. Well, for those of us that said no, you haven't been to one and you are not planning to, we are going to try to convince you otherwise today because we think that they're pretty special events. So without further ado, I would love to pass the baton to our first panelist, Becca Jablonski from CSU. Thank you so much.
Thanks, David. And so great to see a lot of familiar names. Think of yourselves as recruits. We are very excited to have you on board here. Martha, if you don't mind advancing the slides. Let's go to the next one, please. Great. So I was not fortunate enough to attend what I hear was a fantastic, I think 2014-ish New England early meat summit or the 2011 first NC Choices meat summit, but I have been able to attend a more recent NC Choices event, and they are really inspiring. I think David did a great job. For those of us, probably everyone on this call, this webinar, that are trying to work to really help to do a better job connecting actors along the meat supply chain, that there are just so many opportunities that you see from attending these events. And so I think that there was a group of us that were so inspired by attending these events, or folks like Sarah who are on the call today, who recognized that there were opportunities to collaborate with others. The group of us started meeting towards the end of COVID. And what we saw was that, what we all thought was that there were these opportunities where we could come together to try to combat these shared challenges, right? We all were facing fundraising issues. If you put on an event like this, they are incredibly expensive. I organized a one-day event in Colorado called the Colorado Food Summit, and it cost us $160,000 last year to put that on. Now you can do it less expensively, but I think especially when you're trying to bring in diverse stakeholders and offer scholarships, that it can be quite expensive. Challenges delivering consistent, high quality technical assistance and programming, and especially in this place where there are very specialized skill sets that you want to be able to showcase, and sometimes figuring out the right people and not just bringing always the same people to the table can be a challenge. Bridging across the supply chain can be a real issue, particularly when you're talking about polarized subject at times, right? Talking about meat supply chains, different types of production systems, different scales of operations. And so that can be a challenge in identifying speakers. So we were seeing these shared challenges and thought, okay, there's some opportunities to come together. Next slide, please, Martha. So what we did was to form this National Meat Summit Steering Committee. So at first it was informal, but actually in 2020, we created a formal sub-entity under the Wallace Center at Winrock International as the fiscal sponsor. And so the vision of this group was to build multiple stable pathways for livestock producers and supply chain businesses to collaboratively generate socially just, economically viable, and environmentally sustainable benefits for their communities. So it's a pretty grand vision, but we really think about this in many different facets and many different aspects. There's not sort of one right way to achieve this vision. And as a result, you can see that there are a lot of diverse voices at the table in terms of parts of the livestock and educational supply chain that are represented, right? So we include livestock specialists, meat, animal, and social scientists. We have a lot of different disciplines represented. We have nonprofit, ag advocacy, and support organizations. You can see the logos here of the sort of founding members, and we hope to see many others. There are also some advisory members, including the Niche Meat Processors Assistance Network. Next slide, please. So we were fortunate when we started this, we actually already had some funding from the Western SARE, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. And then we were able to bring in some inaugural additional sponsors through the USDA Ag Marketing Service and Farm Credit. And so what that meant, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second here, is that we were able to raise some dollars that we pooled under the Wallace Center at Winrock in this National Meat Summits group, and then basically get divvied out to the different groups based on who is holding a regional convening, when it's being held, how many other convenings are being held, how many people are attending, and other criteria. Next slide, please. So broadly, what we're trying to do is to support local and regional meat supply chain stakeholders by building connections. And I remember in my early days doing work in upstate New York, that there had been a group that had been established called NELPS, which I'm sure Michael Hurwitz remembers what that stands for. I think it's the Northeast Livestock Processing Service Center. But one of the things that they recognized is that in these communities, we kept hearing about challenges around meat processing facilities and access to meat processing, but that they recognized that actually some of the challenges were just about miscommunication across ranchers or beef producers and the processors. And that if we can have better connections, we can increase trust, we can actually figure out how to better communicate. And then through doing that, we can increase knowledge, grow collective skills, and advance market opportunities. So it's really, I think, the connections that are at the heart of being able to achieve all of these other sort of positive outcomes associated with the vision that you saw earlier. Next slide, please. So I mentioned who is currently on the steering committee, and we do welcome other organizations. These are the groups that came to the table first, and we're really grateful to have such a great group of people from many parts of the country, but we certainly recognize that there's parts of the country that are not well represented, and we really hope that that's going to be an opportunity moving forward, maybe with some of you. Next slide, please. So what do we really do as a National Meat Summits group? The first is that we raise funding to support ideally at least 2 regional conferences per year. The Mountain Meat Summit that you'll hear about in a second here was actually postponed because of COVID, but we hope with all of that behind us that this is actually a goal that we'll be able to achieve, and we think we're on pace to do that. And as I mentioned, with really not much convincing, we were able to pretty quickly bring in funding from the USDA Ag Marketing Service and from Farm Credit. And I think that these are pretty easily sellable events because of the value that stakeholders see in participating in them, again, as David said, and also in what we're seeing in terms of some of the preliminary evaluation results that Martha Sullins will present in a second. The second is to identify national and regional experts to support regional events. So this is sort of a rough ballpark estimate, but if you put on a regional convening, perhaps there's about 30% of the content that you really want to be region specific, right? That there's particular regional issues or challenges, right? In a place like Colorado, to get anywhere, you have to go over a mountain pass. That does not apply to everybody in the country. But there are a lot of things that are sort of shared challenges or opportunities, interesting things happening, market developments. And so thinking about who are these speakers that maybe another region's not aware of, but that could do a good job going to different kinds of events. Third, advise selected regional conference organizers. So sort of serve as a de facto advisory committee and vetting some of the content that's there, providing additional ideas. Fourth is ensure specific needs and requirements of national sponsors at regional events are understood, documented, and met by the regional organizers. And I think part of that is achieving the vision, part of that is making sure that sponsors are acknowledged. Support the development and delivery of new regional events through sponsorships, expert coordination, content standardization, and sharing best practices. So one of the things, for example, that I think Martha is going to talk about this year is how successful doing some of the visits to some of the farms and supply chain stakeholders were. So that's something that then we vetted, and that there's things that we've learned from doing that and that we can pass on to other regional convenings. And I think someone like Sarah, who's going to talk in a minute, who's sort of the old pro at putting on these convenings and summits, has a lot of expertise that she's been able to share as some of these newer groups like Colorado State have gotten involved in this. Then evaluate the role and function of the committee, and especially the national sponsorship and regional support processes, right? So is the amount of money that we're providing for each of these convenings fair and appropriate? Is the way that we're bringing in new members fair and appropriate? Is how we're evaluating the summits? Does it make sense? And finally, capture the impacts of these regional summits to help tell a national story on the benefits, limitations, and challenges. And I think this part is really key. I think sometimes we think just by bringing stakeholders together that there's value, but that isn't inherently true. So how do we work together to really say, what is the impact of spending our time and energy and money to actually put on these kinds of convenings? And I think we can all think collectively about how to do this kind of evaluation. For the example, one of the things that Colorado thought about this year and implemented to some extent is thinking about using something like social network analysis. Can we actually see that we are building bridges across more diverse stakeholders across the supply chain? Next slide, please. So with that, what I'm going to do is turn it over to my colleague, Martha Sullins.
Great. Thank you, Becca. And I am going to leave my video off. I have some bandwidth issues today. So I just want to make sure that you all can see our slides and hear me okay. So yeah, thank you, Becca. I'm Martha Sullins. I'm with Colorado State University. I'm an extension specialist and one of the conveners of the International Livestock Forum and Mountain Meat Summit. And so as you'll note from the title, we convened a different event, but it was really in the spirit of the National Meat Summits Committee work. And our vision was really to look at how we could bring together, initiate conversation and collaboration across what's really a very broad supply chain for livestock producers, processors, wholesalers, retailers, and really create an event that had a lot of different opportunities for those conversations and connections. And we were very fortunate to have an event at Colorado State University, the International Livestock Forum, which has been held annually. This was its 9th year. And that event brings together already a lot of different professionals, from international experts on trade in meat and livestock, as well as all the way to students. And so the participation is really broad, and it creates this pipeline of knowledge. And so we built on that International Livestock Forum and convened the Mountain Meat Summit then at the same event. And what this really enabled us to do was bring together industry leaders from across the country, and then also throughout the West, have them all meet together, learn from one another. And so our sessions, the way we set this up was having sessions in the morning that were really foundational to understanding dynamics of the national and international livestock industries, helping participants really understand the setting for their businesses in which they function. I think, as you'll see from some of our evaluation results, we were really successful in creating an event that was able to set the stage for, this is the setting in which your business operates. But then we broke into, in the afternoon, sessions that honed in on very specific challenges, as Becca was referring to, in our region. And so we were very deliberate in how we built out those sessions. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that the key partners in this were Jennifer Martin of our Department of Animal Sciences and Libby Christensen with the Food Systems Institute here at Colorado State University. And so this was really a big effort. And so the way we designed it then was for having these multiple avenues for connection. And the first set of events were tours along the Front Range. And that was really to get our participants out to see different facilities that they may not ordinarily have the opportunity to visit. And we tried to make the focus really on understanding the supply chain for large scale processing, distribution, as well as, mid-scale processing, distribution, retailing, and then a smaller scale, which looked at going to a ranch, looking at mobile meat processing, and looking at wholesale and retail meat sales. And so we tried to provide a setting where you could choose the sector you were really interested in looking at. We also had tours of the National Western Stock Show and kind of behind the scenes glimpses into how that fabulous event operates here in Denver. And so it really was a multifaceted opportunity for people to learn about the livestock industry out of Denver. Then the next day, so that was January the 11th, then January the 12th was our technical program. And so that was a lot more focused on learning about the livestock and meat sectors. And that's where we had our experts who had that international and national perspective speaking in the morning. And then we had panel discussions in the afternoon. So 13 different panel discussions, as well as a fabrication demonstration that allowed us to really focus in on those areas like market diversification, biosecurity, animal welfare. We had sessions on processing facility construction, looking at workforce issues, succession planning for meat processors, the regulatory environment. And so we really tried we didn't have tracks so much as different opportunities for participants to plug in and learn where they felt they really needed that next bit of information. And then the final aspect was dedicated networking time. And so besides we didn't have a trade show, but we did set up opportunities for the participants to meet with one another. Part of that was through what we called curbside consulting. And so we had some technical assistance providers, Flower Hill Institute, USDA's Ag Marketing Service, Market News. We had some folks from our Department of Agriculture come in. We had some other organizations be able to provide some quick technical assistance. And so we had folks who came to speak to Flower Hill Institute and USDA about grants they were interested in submitting to either expand or build a processing plant. So that curbside consulting allowed that face-to-face contact with technical assistance providers. And then our participants walked away with some insights onto, how they might make some changes to their business. And then the last aspect was networking, particularly at the end of the day. We held a happy hour where we really showcased local meats and local beverages and tried to make it a more casual opportunity for our participants to mingle. So I think we had 173 pretty pleased participants. And so to give you a sense of who those folks were, and as Becca said, evaluating this event was really important to us. We wanted to know who attended, what they took away from it, what we can do better the next time. And so as you can see, about half of our participants were either livestock producers or in the education field. So someone from CSU, maybe they were from a nonprofit. But then we also had a pretty diverse group with some, government staff, agency people involved. We had students from both Canada as well as CSU and other institutions around the US, because that's a really fundamental piece of the International Livestock Forum. Input suppliers, and then we had some buyers represented. And of course, probably not enough processors, but we really tried to encourage our processors to take some time away from their busy jobs and attend as well. So again, we wanted to understand what our participants were taking away from the event. And one of the really important aspects was their ability to connect with other people in the supply chain. And so this graph, hopefully you can read it, but it shows you along the vertical axis then who the particular participant group was. And so you can see educator, researcher, input supplier, service provider down that axis. And then if you look at those colored boxes, it shows you the average number of new connections that each one of those sets of participants made with other participants. And so the dark blue are ranchers, the orange are processors, gray are retailers, the other kind of orangish color is input suppliers, service providers. And so it just shows you that, everybody who attended did end up being able to network and make some new connections. And I know, personally, I was able to direct people to like equipment suppliers, because we had just a great range of folks attending the summit. And so it was really nice to be able to make those firsthand introductions and have people get some of their issues maybe resolved or make those new connections. And then the last graph to show you is, and this just illustrates from the ranchers, the producers who attended, the fact that they really did make some new business connections. And we were able to demonstrate this for all of our participant groups. But what this graph shows you is that depending on how our participants came in, like what level of engagement they had in the industry beforehand, what type of connectivity they had. So, were they in meeting other supply chain participants like more than one time a month, or maybe 5 to 10 times per year, which we considered moderate, or low, less than 5 times a year, or say they had really no other connections. That's what those bars show you. Our ranchers, regardless of what their, pre-event connections to supply chain participants was, they were able to meet some new people and make some new connections. And so that was really important to us as well. And then lastly, we did want to know what our conference participants were looking at doing after the event. And so, one of the things that we asked them was, what kinds of activities do you anticipate doing after this as a result of attending the International Livestock Forum and the Mountain Meat Summit? And so the top new business activity was improve or maintain networking. And so that was really exciting to us, because we hoped that we were able to create a climate where, people felt comfortable reaching out and talking to a new processor, talking to another retailer, getting some information from AMS. And then second, offering education based on ideas gained. So a lot of this came from processors who realized, they had some new tools to share with their workers. Expand, explore new markets, equally, great new direction, because we did try to really hone in on new market possibilities and what it would take to get into those new channels. So, wouldn't be complete without sharing that we did have some, really good feedback on the event. We did have a couple of people who told us they didn't appreciate the snow in Denver and the wind on the tours, but, we did the best that we could. But I think overall, the event really showed that it was great to be in a room of individuals who all had they had a lot of the same goals, and by being able to speak to each other, they were really able to get past maybe some predisposed thoughts about different types of supply chains and really be able to learn from one another. And so we're very much looking forward to repeating this event, doing something similar in Colorado. And we know there are some upcoming events. And so because I believe that Tommy Bass isn't on, I'm going to let you know about the next Mountain Meat Summit that's coming up in Prey, Montana, which is outside of Bozeman. And so it will look similar. It'll be a little bit smaller. It's going to be at Chico Hot Springs. And it'll feature a lot of the same elements, as well as some really great tours that Tommy Bass is organizing. And so if you're interested in knowing more about the Mountain Meat Summit in May 2024, a little less than a year away, please reach out to Tommy, and we'll be posting some information. We have a meatsummit.com website where we'll be posting additional information as the event gets set up. And then I will pass this on to Sarah.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Martha. And we'll be there in Montana, and we're very excited. And actually, we were in Colorado in January. We loved the snow. We found it totally exciting as North Carolinians, but it was a fantastic conference. I will say that we're really thrilled to be part of this Meat Summits group. Speaking from the university standpoint, we can sometimes be guilty of recognizing the need within the clients we serve. For example, the meat industry being very siloed, so we need to put together summits. And yet speaking for myself, hadn't actually realized, oh my gosh, we actually need to network with other groups when it comes to organizing summits, because we are siloed. So this has been a huge benefit to us to partner with others and learn from one another collectively. It's going to make us all stronger. So the program that I work for is called NC Choices. We're a program based out of the Center for Environmental Farming Systems, as well as North Carolina Cooperative Extension. Our program is solely based on growing, advancing local, niche, pasture-raised meats and the supply chain they depend upon. So we're talking farmers, processors, regulatory folks, you name it. Sometimes we call ourselves like a statewide NMPAN. And so we have been really excited to be able to hold another meat conference. We'll be holding our 7th annual NC Choices Carolina Meat Conference. That's next year, 2024. It's going to be July 29th to the 31st in Boone, North Carolina. So it's a summertime activity, but luckily you're going to be in the mountains of North Carolina. So it'll be nice and cool and beautiful. We decided to hold it there. It's a little bit closer to the state line as well. So we can kind of work a little bit more strategically with our friends and partners in Virginia and Tennessee for regional impact. And you can go ahead and change the slide. It's just a picture, Martha, on the next one. Years ago, NMPAN created an old report that is still relevant today. I want to say it was 2013, called Moving from Convenience to Commitment. Some old school NMPANers might remember that, about really farmers committing into the businesses of processors and processors vice versa. And that is really foundational to the whole purpose of why we started the Carolina Meat Conference, and still relevant today in the meat summits. It's to bring people together, to have a really good time and to learn a lot and to push ourselves, have uncomfortable conversations, have exciting conversations, bring culinary people into the room, bring sponsors, equipment company, you name it. So the Carolina Meat Conference, if you want to learn more about it, go to carolinameatconference.com and you can click on our constant contact button for any up-to-date information. We'll be sending out, we'll have a call for proposals coming out late this fall. And of course, information about registration. Our conference is usually about 400 to 450 participants. And again, butchers, meat processors, research, extension, much similar to the other things you heard already in this webinar. And we do curbside consulting and tours, hands-on. We've even done live poultry processing, and anything that we can bring in and demo in a live way, we want to do it as much as possible because we think that that's the way people learn the best. But you come to these conferences to establish relationships, to land retail or wholesale deals, if that's the case, to secure gigs, to get national media attention brought to your farm or restaurant. From our evaluations, 95% of our participants meet 3 to 5 people that positively impact their business from these conferences. And just to have a really good time, because when you can relax and talk to one another, you're gonna really share some great ideas. So please save the date. We're excited about it and hope to see you in North Carolina next summer. I'll hand it off to you, Pete.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Good to see everyone hang with us. We're kind of rounding the bend here to the Q&A section. So just a prompt, if you haven't, if you're holding on to a question and you want to get that to any of us here that are talking, use that Q&A feature at the bottom. We'd be happy to, answer them, read them out and answer them for everybody's benefit, or do a quick answer via a text chat right there in the box. But again, at the very bottom, click that Q&A button and you can throw any questions. And we are really an open book here. This committee, some of which are on this conversation, this is coming from a genuine interest in collaboration. There's not something that's funding us all to be together. We do it because we know that it helps everyone's work, and we want to make sure that we're helping your work by answering your questions or helping you feel included in whatever that may be. But by way of introduction, I'm Pete Huff. I'm one of the co-directors here at the Wallace Center, and based in Western Wisconsin. So I have a particular interest in a Midwest Summit. That's not something that we have on the books yet, but it's learning and growing alongside our more organized friends out west and out east. But we certainly are interested in the Midwest. I want to just give you a little bit of information about how to stay connected or how to stay informed. We have a wonderful website here, meetsummits.com, and you can check it out. It's where we have a lot of information, including the names and faces of all of us and our contact info, as well as our colleagues that aren't with us here on the webinar speaking today. We also have information about the regional summits. There was a question about what's coming up, and as we get things confirmed, the Mountain Meat Summit, the one out east with Sarah and her crew and the Carolinas and beyond, all that information lives on that website, meetsummits.com, and we'll make sure that we get that updated. We also have information there on sponsorship. We're always looking for how to bring dollars in to support folks getting these summits done and done well. And so that means fundraising nationally. It means helping folks find regional sponsors. So there's information about that if it's something that might be up your alley or someone who's interested in supporting these things. We have a really beautiful sponsorship packet on there, and folks can take a look at that. And then there's also a contact form on there, which is something that's really important to stay in touch with us. We're more than happy to take your questions via email, and you can fill out the form and get in touch with us there. What we would say is that if you are interested, if you're interested on the sponsoring side of things, there is a specific email along with the packet that's sponsorship at meetsummits.com, and that's something that we use to kind of air traffic control some of the funding questions. But if you're interested in, potentially leading a summit or being part of an effort that's underway in a region for a summit, what we invite you to do is to attend one if you're able to. And there's 2 coming up in May and July of next year that are hopefully accessible to folks. And we'd love to, invite you as attendees to learn and to observe and to see what works and what you like and what you change. And then to get in touch with us. We're more than happy to invite people into the conversation and to be part of the discussion with the committee. We're not trying to own the space, we're trying to guide it well. And so if you're interested in helping with one, maybe the ones out west or out east or in the Midwest, feel free to reach out to us via that contact form. That's the easiest way to get in touch. If you're in a region where there isn't a summit that we've talked about, either finalized or potential, so New England or the Southwest or the West Coast, we'd love to see more summits in more places. That's ultimately our goal, and the mission of our collaboration is to get more of these in more places so that folks along the whole value chain can really find a place to talk with each other and work out what works for them and to figure out the solutions that kind of get everybody taken care of in the process. And so we just invite you to think about that if you're in a region and you might want to lead something, that reaching out to us. There's a lot of knowledge within the committee. We certainly don't have it all, but we know how to ask questions and we certainly know how to find resources to support each other as we go. And there's some pretty good templates out there for how conferences can be done and where there might be some pitfalls that we would encourage folks to avoid and step over. So that's the major message that I'm here to bring to you all, is just to check out the website. It's a great place. That's where we hub most of our information, and then reach out to us either with a sponsorship email or with a contact form or one of us directly. We're all more than happy to chat with you about this if it's specific to the region or a broader area that you're interested in. So please do reach out. We're friendly. We certainly like to have the conversation and genuinely do want to make sure that we're helping these events happen as best we can in as many places as we can. So we're going to do one last final poll, just to ask one last question here. So I'm going to pass it back over here so that we can get the poll launched. So David, I think you're going to bring that up for us, if you would. So just as you should be seeing this on your screen here, we're curious, where your interest may be. So please indicate a desired level of involvement. If you want to just learn more, if you want to attend one that's coming up, if you want to support one that might be underway or kind of join a team that might be wanting to plan one in a region, or if you want to step up and maybe kind of get the conversation started. Take a moment, pick one of those. We know polls are they're limited in all the options that we can provide, but this will help us give us a little bit of a sense of where you might be and where you might want to go.
Okay, just another minute or so. We've got about half of the participants voted. Yeah, it looks like we've tapped out there.
Excellent. Well, that kind of makes sense there. It's a high commitment to lead something, so appreciate that that's folks are being practical and about the effort there, but it's good to see that there's a lot of interest in learning more and attending the summit, which is really what we suggest as a starting point is, just kind of observe the data or the information that we have on the website. We're going to continue to add more as we have more of these summits. And then of course, attending one is certainly a great step to take in deciding how you want to be involved. So maybe we'll park it there. And David, if you want to walk us through some Q&A, I see that we have a couple in that section.
Yeah, great. And everyone, if anybody has any questions whatsoever, please just type in the Q&A box and we'll get those answered by the panelist group. So our first one's from NMPAN board member, Catherine Quambeck. Hey, Catherine, good to see you. She says, longtime Meat Summit fan here, having been to both NC Choices and the Mountain Meat Summit, and can attest to how valuable these events are. I also wonder about ability to do mini summits or one-day sessions that could be pre or post events for existing conferences. Events like Moses, NESAWG, EcoFarm, etc. Just a thought. Panelists, what say you?
I think that's a great idea, Catherine. And I think also, other organizers can probably speak to the fact that one of the biggest headaches and costs is room blocks and meals and overnight, and you make it a day event. You cut out dinner, you cut out the overnight, you cut out the big heavy expense things, and it's much more manageable. I'd say the downside, top of mind, would just be when you're working on supply chain audience, you have a group of 5 or 6 or 7 different people. So sometimes it's so tricky to pack the kind of content that could appeal to each one of those audience members in a short day, which sometimes is why it bleeds into more, but I think that it can be done, especially in little chunks, especially for regional impact. I think it's a great idea.
And maybe just to tag on to that, Sarah, I think also, and I'll look at the other folks from the Meat Summit Committee to see if I'm saying the wrong thing here, but the goal of our coordination nationally is not to tell people what is needed for their region. It's really to listen to what they think is needed for the region and to be responsive and supportive of that. And so it's not necessarily about a Xerox copy of the same thing in as many places. There can be some efficiencies to that. And if the need is there for that, then of course we want to streamline and support that as much as possible. But really that folks know where, folks are gathering or prefer to gather in their region and how, and that there's different looks and feels for different places. And so we'll just not let that be a limitation for folks that want to be part of this conversation, is to think that it has to look just like these particular summits that have been shared. That really part of it is that responsiveness and providing folks what they need in the form that they need it. So just jump on in, and we'd love to hear ideas, and we could help evolve all of our events as we go forward.
I was just going to add in that, Catherine, you definitely identified one of the things that came out of our Mountain Meat Summit was, some of the folks who attended said, could you bring something on a smaller scale to our region of the state? And so I know Libby and Jennifer did a mini summit down in Southwest Colorado, and that is really important because there are a lot of folks who can't travel. It's hard for them to get away to Denver, Fort Collins, but they could, gather in their own area, look at really specific regional issues and regional market opportunities there in the southwest part of the state. And I think it was really successful. And so I think it's a wonderful idea. And I know we'll be looking at that more here in Colorado, and hopefully, other states can do the same thing. But I think, as Sarah said, you do need some funding to do that and everything, but the benefits are huge in terms of local impact.
Okay, we've got a question from Katie Oltoff from Chop Local. Katie says, Chop Local has a USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program grant for education for direct-to-consumer livestock farmers. So collaborating on a meat summit may be something we could use grant dollars towards. That's a really interesting comment. Any thoughts on that, panel?
We've done that where we have a regional coalition in the western part of the state that, not for the Mountain Meat Summit, but for our Colorado Food Summit, was able to use some of their technical assistance dollars. I can't remember through which AMS grant, to support exactly that. So their participants or people in their region could come and attend. And then there was a specific learning opportunity that they wanted to engage in. So I think that's exactly kind of the point, is that instead of all doing something separate, if we can find opportunities to collaborate, and it can be either sort of dovetailing on another event, as Catherine brought up, or it could be actually bringing people and collaborating and making an event bigger and including more of the opportunities that are going to benefit different regional stakeholders.
Great. Okay, next question from Philip. Greetings from my home farm in Vermont and the Lexicon of Sustainability, where we've been working on building resources for collaborative regional value chains in the U.S. meat sector. I'm curious as to the differences between the two 2024 summits. How much overlap is there, and will they be distinct topically? Thank you for your collective work in making these happen.
Hi, Phyllis. Great question. Yes, they will be distinct this is one of those great questions that we had to essentially ask ourselves in the Meat Summit group and getting started right away was, how do we come together on a national level? What do we need collectively? But how do we keep our own regional identity? I will say absolutely. A lot of the right now, for instance, in North Carolina, we're doing a lot of Zoom coffees with nearby states and other groups that we need to ask what their needs are specific to them. So we're diving deep on that here. And I know our topics are not going to be necessarily the same as Tommy's and what's happening in Montana. There will be some overlap, I'm sure, in terms of some production and various processing topics. But I would say one of the biggest benefits is the people that you bring into the room, and that you meet and talk to your own processor, and that you meet and connect with your own regulatory person in your county and find out what's happening regionally specific. So that will be very unique for sure. And yeah, we're not copying one another's programming, so that will also be differentiated.
Imagine that Sarah's going to focus a lot more on pork and pastured pork, and Tommy's going to focus more on beef, just based on sort of some of the production systems. I mean, not that that exclusively happens, but that you have different production systems and challenges.
Hey, great. Got a question from Poppy Davis. How do you envision different groups working together to organize a meat summit on a multi-state region and trade-off location and lead organization? Related, how do you see academic and non-academic organizations trading off leadership roles in multi-state regions?
Well, I was just going to say, Poppy, that it's exactly what we're doing. I mean, and it's been fabulous. I mean, we have been able to work with NMPAN to, source ideas. We had an advisory committee of producers and processors who helped us develop the Mountain Meat Summit in Colorado. And then we're very interested in supporting both of the 2024 meat summits, both in Montana as well as in Boone, and have pledged to come out and do whatever kind of legwork we can do to support them, because we just want to see them be successful. So I think it's more our commitment to the concept that makes it easy for us all to work together, and the fact that we've kind of pooled funding to some degree. And so we just have, I think we've laid this groundwork with memoranda of understanding that we can work well together. So I think it's been a successful venture so far. You were going to say, Becca?
I was going to say you should speak to this, but I'll say that before the Meat Summits group got established formally, the Mountain Meat Summit idea was actually born with Tommy Bass and with Cody out of Wyoming. And so it was already in place to think within the region, how do we do that, right? How do we have an event that's going to happen in Colorado, and then it's going to happen in Montana? And we've just been really lucky that all of us decided to come together and support also the other regions. But I think it's exhausting to put on these events, right? It takes so much time. And so the fact that we have a place that we can send folks from our region to Montana, not that we wouldn't want to send them to North Carolina, but if the focus a little bit more regionally, is just a great opportunity to sort of share the wealth, provide support, but not take the leadership role.
And I might just chip in from a regional perspective that is still forming to that question, is that, a lot of it just starts with, I think Martha brought up the point that I want to underline, is that it's really the concept of like kind of doing the conversations. And that's like what it looks like in the Midwest, where it's a lot of conversations with folks that we know are maybe aligned with or interested in being aligned with the concept of getting all these folks in the room with a really kind of practical emphasis of like, how do we really help build relationships, clarify information flows, and hopefully produce a lot of value for folks in a concentrated way. And that kind of snowballs out into other conversations. And I think if you focus on the concept, it really manages for the relationships quite well, in that everyone's really kind of put their shoulder to the wheel to kind of get something done. And that helps with kind of any competition, as it's really meant to be very collaborative, very open source. And I think the committee on the national level emphasizes this. It's really not, no one's holding, a proprietary information. It's really open source, and what can we do to help each other? And I think that same spirit flows down into regions that are trying to figure it out a little bit more. Ultimately, someone has to hold the baby, and kind of be the logistical home for things. And so that, I think, we found that kind of works out where, maybe it's a university that's got a great meat lab, and they can they've got the facilities, okay, well, you've got the networks. And I think folks can bring in their expertise when it's treated in the open spirit way that the committee really, I think, wants to reinforce and support at the regional level.
Okay, well, that answers all of our questions, unless there's any others that want to trickle in the next couple of seconds. While we're waiting for maybe a final thought, do any panelists have any parting words for our audience today?
I would just say, we're really grateful for all of you who tuned in today and, kind of came on the journey of how this committee got started, what our goals and vision are. And, we're really hoping that this will lead you to attend a Meat Summit and, maybe partner in developing one, because I think it's so beneficial for, building networks, continuing or starting conversations. And, we really hope growing those local and regional markets, but, we see the need to have more meat summits across the US. And so we're hoping that some of you will be inspired to join us. So.
One thing, I think what we've talked about in our committee calls is that, we're in this really fortunate moment of having a lot of resources available to help and support local and regional meat supply chains. The challenge is really sort of that like technical assistance, capacity building, right? So we really need folks to come together who have different skill sets, knowledge, expertise, right? If we're going to actually effectively use those resources. And so I think this is just a really opportune moment to come together to think about how we leverage our collective resources to support the sector.
Yeah, well said. Rebecca and I often talk about we don't know if we're ever going to have this degree of resource available to us again in the future. It's such an exciting time, but also feels urgent. So hopefully we'll get lots of, many hands make light work, and hopefully we'll see lots of minds come together to continue to support our slice of the meat pie, as it were. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Again, I put the link to where one of the probably many places this replay will be housed. It'll be on the NPAN webinar archive site. It'll also be hosted in our YouTube page, and then it may also be on the Meat Summit page. If you have any follow-up questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, zarlingd@oregonstate.edu. Put this in the chat box real quick. Or anyone else in this panel right here, and we'll be able to post the deck along with the replay in that listing. So again, thanks so much to our panel. That was really fascinating. I can't wait to go to another Meat Summit. I secretly am hoping to be able to hit both of the really big ones next year, but the next time around, but we'll see. And hopefully we'll be able to meet some of the people in our audience today as well. Thank you so much, everyone.